Hey there, thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode of The Deliberate Zoomer, hosted by myself, Silas Maynor, and my good friend, Michael Simonton. We hope you enjoyed today's episode.
Who?
Bam, we're live. What's up, Mike?
Oh, not too much, Silas. Just enjoying another beautiful Saturday morning. How about yourself?
Pretty much the same. It's a beautiful day in New York City. Sun's shining. It was 50 degrees this morning, my favorite type of weather. So went for a nice run and ready to take on the day. So awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to join me with these podcasts here. Just for everybody listening, what we're doing here is we're going to be talking about, we're going to have this series of shows where we discuss living your 20s with intention, right? So the idea here is being deliberate with your decisions, choosing who you want to be and taking actions to become that. So today we're going to be focusing on the topic of accepting the facts. So taking responsibility for your actions and then, accepting where you stand in life, what the situation is. So from that point, you can then go to the next steps. So I guess with that, Mike, do you want to kick it off with some initial thoughts? I know your thoughts that we had discussed previously on this topic were pretty interesting to me. So I want to let you kind of take the lead here.
Absolutely. I'll go for it. So when it comes to, living deliberately and accepting the facts, the first thing that I think you really need to question is, okay, so you have these facts, life has laid out a certain set of happenings or certain circumstances in front of you. And you have two options, you can accept them or you can deny them. You can walk away. And those two options, the choice that you make, will very much determine the rest of your life. Or at least it will set you in a trajectory that will be hard to course correct. And it's very imperative that you make the right one. So why don't we break them down? You can accept them or you can deny them. Well, what happens when you deny them? So by denying the facts, by taking reality and recognizing it, seeing it for what it is and being like, no, I just don't want to accept that. I can't accept that. What you're going to do is you're going to create a false sense of reality. You're going to live in your own alter imagination. It's not going to be the real world. It's not going to be the reality that is actually happening around you. It's going to be your own creation of your own imagination. And that is going to trickle down and ruin so many facets of your life because it's going to be fundamentally, you're going to be operating on, it's not a sound foundation. It's not reality. So to me, you really only have one option, that is to accept reality. But if you were to try denying it, where that leads in the very end is basically victimhood. It leads to you pushing blame on others, to not, taking responsibility for anything. And for ultimately, you disempower yourself to ever get really anywhere in life, because you put everything on, all the onus on someone else. And you really you cut the legs right out from yourself. And so to me, that just seems like a horrible idea. And I mean, that's my thoughts on not accepting them. Silas, I'd love to hear yours.
I think that it's something that I personally feel, that I've struggled with. I should have struggled with more. I don't know if it's because I'm just optimistic, but for me growing up, I had not the greatest, family situation. I had a lot of opportunities that, I had a lack of opportunities compared to a lot of other people. But, I still have got to a point in my life where I'm extremely happy with life. I moved from the middle of nowhere. For people listening who are not aware, I'm from the middle of nowhere, Wisconsin. Grew up working pretty hard, was homeschooled. So in the terms of, most of the world had less access to quote unquote opportunities, as opposed to other people or compared to other people. But still, I live in New York City now. I have a really awesome job that I'm very passionate about. And I feel like I have a very good sense of purpose. And so I guess, I look at what I could have done, and what I feel like a lot of people do from my conversations with people my age is they have a shitty upbringing. They have really bad family situations, sometimes way worse than mine. And they blame that on they blame their inability to be happy and all these things on their situation. But there's also the people who I've seen who have a worse situation than me, who have become extremely successful despite the odds or despite the predicaments that they were in. And it's because they accepted responsibility is how I see it, right? I've had so many conversations with, again, people close to my age or even older than me who just, even if they did have really good situations growing up, they're like, oh, I just can't get ahead in life. It's just too hard. Everything's against me. There's nothing I can do about it. And I don't see how that is beneficial to anybody, right? I don't see, like you said, not accepting it is to create a false reality. And I think it's very true, and it's just very sad. So I guess, what do you say to those people who say that my circumstances are difficult? My circumstances they prevent me from succeeding in life, from being happy. What do you say to those people?
I think what I'll go with those people would be to just break it down to them and be like, listen, everything that happens in life, it happens, like a lot of things will be outside of your control. The one thing that you can control, though, is your outlook. And so you can see these happenings, you can see these instances as either objections or opportunities. And to me, I'd break it down like that. I'd be like, so far, like everything you've laid out, yes, you had a rough upbringing. Yes, that's awful. I'm sorry that you didn't have those same schooling opportunities as other people, that you didn't get a scholarship for whatever sport it was. But those are just either objections or opportunities. And the way that you frame them in your mind will alter how you approach them. And so being like, you can just accept that, yes, you didn't get them. That doesn't mean life is out to get you. Life's indifferent. Life doesn't care. The only thing that matters is what you put into it. So, accept that responsibility and just like go, like realize it's an opportunity. Whenever anything bad happens, your response should be good. And this is something I got from Jocko Willink, if anyone's familiar, but that's exactly what it should be. Because it's like, okay, I had a rough morning. Good. I can test my patience. Oh, I'm sorry. Like I tripped and fell. Good. I can see how resilient I am. Like I have had plenty of really bad mornings where like everything seems to be going wrong. And in my mind, I smile and I go, I know I could take this as being awful. I know that I'd be like, this is just going to be one of those days. I hate it already. But no, I'm like, no, good. This is an opportunity, not an objective. This is an opportunity for me to be better and to get better. And so you reframe it like that. You just take them and you reframe them and you realize that the only thing you can't control is yourself. And so by optimizing that, by optimizing your actions, you can set yourself up for success. And so you can flip that script and you can finally feel like you have some control of life and what's happening, and you can switch it around. You can become the protagonist to your own story.
I think something that I remember, this happened just a few weeks ago, was I don't even know what day of the week it was, but it was some day, and the day started off awful, right? I had a couple. First of all, I had bad news about like how our commission structure was. It was totally different than what we thought it was. So it wasn't a huge deal, but it was definitely enough to like make me kind of pissed off. I was like, dang. And then I had a whole bunch of other things go wrong at work. And this was all before like 10 a.m., right? It was just one thing after the next that was terrible. And I remember sitting in the office just like so upset about everything. And this is one thing I love Twitter for. I decided, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to let this bother me. So I went, and just to get my thoughts out, I went on Twitter and I was like, this day has started off awfully, and I'm not going to let it bother me. I'm going to change because I realize there's many better days that are ahead, and this doesn't have to, these 2 hours of the morning don't have to define the rest of the day. So I think that the act of the way, I guess, for people who are stuck in that loop, it's obviously, the hardest part is realizing you're stuck in that loop, right? I don't think most people realize that. You know what I mean? They don't realize that they're doing that they're putting themselves in a victim place. So I think the way for, anybody listening, whether you think you do that or not, is to develop a habit of stepping outside of yourself or asking people's advice, right? Basically seeing yourself from a third party. Like if you were to zoom out of your body and you can see what the situation is from a disinterested third party, are you being a victim? Are you choosing the narrative that is my life sucks and there's nothing I can do about it? What are your thoughts on that, on how to get out of that loop?
No, I think that's a very excellent and valid point, and you're absolutely right. That's probably the best way to do it. The other option you have, I mean, which isn't really an option. Normally, what I've seen with people is either they hit a rock bottom, or they have one of those instances where someone sheds some sort of light, and they realize that, oh, like I need to detach. I need to assess the situation and make a call. Like I need to take a step out of myself and stop. Like, forget about your emotions. Yes, they're important, but for one, stop feeling and start thinking. Look at things objectively. Like in so many of these instances in these stories, like for instance, you had a rough morning there. This Thursday, woke up 6:30 in the morning, stoked, went downstairs to work out, and it had been pouring for like 36 hours, and our house had started like leaking in. There was puddles of water everywhere. And I looked around, I was like, great. I was like, okay, I'm going to get my workout in, and then I'm going to go take care of this. I walk into the garage because I got a little bit of a home gym. I went to do some squats, and because my shoes had just gotten wet, they slipped right out from underneath me, and I landed so hard on my ass. And I was like, okay, we're cleaning up right now. And so I spent the next 2 hours of like this morning that I had all planned out, just soaking up water. And I realized it was like, this would ruin some people's day, but I'm not taking it personally. Like, oh my gosh, nature's not out to get me. Like, it's not the world conspiring against me. It's just shit happens sometimes. And you got to take that step back. You've got to break that chain of like that chain of thoughts that leads you spiraling down that emotional self-pitying rabbit hole, and be like, okay, something bad happened here. I'm just going to do my best and handle it. So yeah, taking that step back is so pivotal, and it's so essential. Because that's what's going to allow you to progress forward in the best way possible. Otherwise, you're going to be acting from an irrational state of emotions, and you're going to make the wrong calls.
Yeah, it's very difficult. So for me, this is specifically a point that I'm trying to figure out and work on right now, is the idea of not getting emotionally involved. Like, especially for example, with clients, right? So I have clients who sometimes like, they're just not the greatest to deal with, right? And it's whether it's they're having a bad day or not, like they want to just go on a rant and they want to tell you what you're doing is wrong, when in reality you're the expert, you know what to do, the procedure. But I have this issue where I essentially take it personally, and then I start arguing with them, right? So I need to, like, it's not a really like aggressive argument, but it's like me basically pushing back, and as a result, we don't get anywhere, right? Mm-hmm. And so my coworker's trying to help me realize how to step out of myself, like just realize it's not so serious, like those kind of things, right? And then if you don't think it, like he doesn't take it seriously, he sees life as a joke, essentially, to some extent. So he's always just like, he's essentially like a walking troll, like an internet troll, but in real life. And so I think that type of mentality can be helpful at times, because I've seen it so much in many of my relatives, because it just kind of runs in our family. This idea that everybody, like you said, nature's not out to get you. That really hit home, because it's like all of these people who I know in my family and extended family are like, everything that happens, whether it's somebody cuts you off in the road, it's like they take it personally. Like they were out to get you right there, Mike. Like they wanted to cut you off because you're such an asshole. It's like, you're not that important. People don't care about you that much. Like they don't think about you. They're just in their own worlds. Don't get so caught up about those things.
Yes. And on that note, the two most egotistical people are narcissists and people who pity themselves. Because people who, the woe is me, you're literally saying like something bad could happen to your friend, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe my friend's going through this. And you just feel bad for yourself because you're feeling bad if your friend or something else happens. And but it's all about you. Like you take everything and you make it about you. And that's so narcissistic and egotistical. And you realize that like nature's been after everyone since day one. Like it's a hard life. Don't get me wrong, but it's not personal. Like,
Yeah.
and in your situation with work, the best thing you can do is you have to detach. You have to realize, feel those emotions building up, that fight or flight instinct kicking in. And you've got to be like, okay, no, I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to step outside of my body and like see this from a third party perspective. And I'm going to realize that they're not attacking me. What they really have is an unspoken problem or challenge or frustration. And if you can capitalize and identify that, then you just turn this person who was just yelling at you and telling you you're doing a horrible job and what you're doing is wrong. You can turn them into an ally, and you can move forward and probably have a very successful relationship with that client if you are able to just detach and not take things personally, because then it allows you to get to the root of the issue.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think in terms of, for the individual, the issue to me that seems the hardest to overcome is the ability to recognize it. So do you have any things that you think, I guess maybe thoughts or just reflections to people listening who might not think they have an issue? Like I've seen it so many times that people clearly have an issue stepping outside of themselves and they refuse to even think that it's possible. What thoughts do you have to offer those people, or for the people who are curious, who are genuinely curious, which I feel like wouldn't have too much of an issue, but what methods do you have to help them to get to those situations where they can identify the issues and start to one by one kind of cut those out?
Okay, so very great question. I wish I had a complete solid answer. But the thing is, and the hardest situation you will always run into is the foundation of what these people operate on is basically the deference of responsibility, the pushing it off. They're the victimhood. And so getting them to realize that they can take responsibility is such a hard task. And it takes time, takes a lot of time, energy, and love. But one of the things that I would say for sure is you'd have to break it down to them. You'd have to get them to identify a pattern, because otherwise you can't, knowing from personal experience, you can't isolate any situation with an individual like that. Something bad happens, you'd be like, no, you're just making this about you. They're like, no, I'm not. They get whatever mad. I have sisters that do this. So the only way to really approach it that I've found is you have to be in a context where you can have a little deeper conversation and spend a little more time on it. Because you're going to want to break it down and like work through and help them realize that there is a pattern here, because that's the only time that it's going to register with them that this is something that they repeatedly do. Obviously that's the pattern, because like I've tried. You can't isolate any situation. Something bad happens, people freak out. You can't be like, no, you're making this about you. They think you're stupid. They just don't agree, whatever. So you have to find the pattern, and you have to be able to express that to them in a way where they are receptive of it, which is also hard because, when they were pushing off all responsibility, they're not going to want to take it. And that's why earlier I said the only really times I've seen people break out of something like this is like they hit a rock bottom moment or something just awful happens, and or they realize that they feel so powerless and out of control that they want to change. And then the other time is when somehow they are able to step out of themselves. But I think the best thing would be to help identify what they want out of life, because if you've got to tie this into a bigger picture than just the here and now. Otherwise, they're not going to have the energy to pursue it and break such a pattern. So if you're like, okay, well, let's talk about what type of person you want to be. Okay. And let's throw all those ifs aside, all those ifs, buts, like nature out to get you, all that stuff aside. What would you really want to do with yourself? Where do you want to become? And then from there, you can slowly, once you've got that solid image in mind, or even a vague one, it doesn't matter. Once you have that in mind, you can slowly start working in the ifs and be like, it's a slow process where you're like, okay, well, what if this doesn't happen? You're like, well, if this doesn't happen, you'll course correct. You can do this, this, and this. and they're like, oh, okay, that objection goes away. And you just got to work them through it. It's a long, hard process. And I wish there was an easy answer, but really a lot of it's going to come down to that person finally wanting to take responsibility. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And that's what I'll end on there.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I I don't want to spend, I guess, too much time on it, because in reality, the people who are going to change and who are going to accept responsibility, it's going to be something that they have to choose, right? You can put all of the facts in front of them, just like the water in the horse, but you can't make them accept the facts, right? It's going to come down to them. So I guess on that note, then, for people who do accept responsibility, I guess why don't we talk a little bit more about the kind of the consequences and the positive side of things, right? Because one thing I've gathered from the different books I've read about psychology is that focusing on one thing, regardless of whether it's negative or positive, a lot will end up leading you to become more like that thing. So if you're focusing on the negative things, obviously there's a very good chance you're going to become more negative towards those areas. So, what are the positive outcomes of accepting the responsibility? What are some stories that you have, or examples that you have from other people, where accepting the responsibility can lead to great things, like can lead to a really happy life?
Yeah. So I think very, very basic, if I accepting responsibility, you then accept mastership and ownership of your own life, and therefore you have the opportunity to take it whichever direction you'd like. And that is, living deliberately in a nutshell. But like one really, really cool story about accepting responsibility is, I love the story of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. So for those of you who don't know, and I don't pretend to know all the details in the story, but the general gist of it is, he always had dreams of playing pro football. He went to Miami University, I believe, and was started off for some time. He was doing great. And then some new guy came in, and he told him, he's like, I'm coming for your spot. And unfortunately, it happened. I think it was a senior year. It was like a freshman or a sophomore took over his starting position, and he was on the bench. So there basically went his dreams of playing pro football, but he wasn't ready to give up on that dream yet. So his plan was to play in Canada. And that's what he did. He went over to Canada and played there for a short amount of time. Like every single paycheck he got, he sent back home to, I think it was his wife at the time, and maybe their kid. I forget exactly. And that's what his life was for a short amount of time. And then he got cut from there too. So not only did he, had inspire his whole life so far to play in pro football, which got ripped out from underneath him from, that, I forget the starter, his name, but from the other player coming in, taking his position. And then he got cut from Canadian football, which is like, it's not even football at that point in time,
Which is yeah.
Sorry. So there he goes. Like that's his whole life ambition ripped out from underneath him. He flies home to Miami. He has his dad drive a couple hours to pick him up. And on the drive back, he looked in his wallet and he realized he only had $7. And he tells his story so much better. Obviously it's his own, but that was kind of the moment where he's like, shit, I have $7. Like I have to make a change. I have to do something. And so since then, he went WWE. He owns I think it's $7 production company. He does so much and he's so freaking successful. You don't need to take my word for it. Like you go watch his movies, it's fantastic. So that was an instance where, horrible situation, awful hand, your whole life's ambition ripped out right underneath you. And instead of blaming everyone else and pointing the finger, instead of being like, oh, woe is me, he's like, no, something's got to change. I'm what I can control. I accept responsibility. I accept the situation, and I'm going to go after it. I'm going to get after it. And so I think that's a cool story. It's very powerful. There you can look up YouTube videos of him getting into it in a lot more detail. Highly recommend it if you're looking for some motivational stuff. But that's one instance.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of people, I guess, on a smaller scale that I know. But another person that a lot of people might be aware of is Gary Vaynerchuk's story is kind of interesting, right? It's pretty similar. He worked very hard as a kid. He obviously didn't have everything, he had a very, tough upbringing to some extent, but then was able to create this great empire that he has created, right? VaynerX, right? So I think that just in general, like once you mentioned it, once you decide that you're the master of your own life, that you're the master of what you become, like you're a ship, life is the ocean, and you get to steer where you're going. It's so liberating because then you're not held captive to these other things that happen, these circumstances, right? But it's a matter of, and it's not something that comes easily. You have to constantly remind yourself and develop a habit of acknowledging the reality of life, which is this is very difficult. It's not always easy to recognize when I'm getting into these situations where I'm becoming a victim. So you have to develop a habit of checking yourself. I know that there's this one habit that is mentioned. I don't know where I heard this, but every time you walk through a doorway, to remind yourself to stand up straight with your shoulders back is this idea. And you can do something like that, where every time this certain event happens, you remember, oh wait, what am I doing? Am I getting really caught up in this negative feedback loop? Do I need to take a step back and just recognize? And I think ways that you can do that are by, daily breathing exercises, or, some people use exercising to do that as well. I just think that's something consistent, so that way you can manufacture at your own will the ability to step outside of yourself, right? It's something that you create through a habit, and you associate the correct feelings with it, right? So kind of like neuro-linguistic programming to get into a certain mindset. So obviously there's so many possibilities once you decide, because you realize, as soon as you realize, and this is the thing that I had realized that back when I started practice, was once you realize that you are in charge and you can choose kind of what you want to be, you see that there's so many resources, literally so many resources, and now you just need to go figure out which ones are beneficial towards your goal.
Exactly. And like, it's this scarcity mindset versus like the mindset of a plenty. No, what is it? I'm missing the other mindset, the term for it, but it's basically opportunity mindset. Yeah. So you switch from being like scarce on resources. You're like, oh no, like there's everything's out to get me, whatever. I don't have all these opportunities. Life's hard. And you're like, no, wait, I am. And then you start looking, and because of what you mentioned earlier, those with psychology, and you kind of become what you aim at, or you kind of become what you emulate, what your main thoughts are, what your goal is. And so by switching that, you start to realize all those opportunities. You start to realize that, you know what, I can actually do this. And the opportunities and my potential, like, it's through the roof, man. You can, like, this is America. It's awesome. You can pretty much do and become whatever you want to do and become. For instance, maybe not the best example, but like you want to you want to be a super successful person. I mean, look at tons of these people in New York City. Look at San Francisco. Look at all these huge tech places. Or like, even if you don't want to do that, you want to be a pro gambler, go to Las Vegas. You want to be like a pro wrestler, dude, freaking start doing jujitsu, MMA. Like, there's so much potential. You can literally be whatever you want to do. You like video games? You can build your own, for starters, but also start streaming on Twitch. You can, like, how many of these 12-year-old kids do we hear of that are making so much money just from streaming? Like, if you really think that you're oppressed and that you can't do and become like anything you want, open your eyes. It's a beautiful freaking world. I love this flag behind me. I love America. And like, to the point of like, one of the best things I think that you can do to help switch that mentality is literally wake up early, work out every day. So what I found is I feel the best about myself. I feel the best about life when I get up early and I work out, because what that does is it starts getting the muscles, your body moving, the blood flowing. You get that serotonin going in your brain, and then you get the positivity, the positive feedback, and you're like, you're doing stuff. And that just gets me fired up for the rest of the day. I think morning workouts are one of the best things anyone can ever do if they're looking to grab their life, by the throat, let's say, and just get after it. So
by the horns, yeah, grab it by the horns.
By the horns. Oh, yeah, I was gonna.
Yeah,
mine was a lot more less appropriate.
But no, I think that's a kind of a good note to end it on. Is, there is so much potential, and the whole point of what we're going to discuss in later episodes of this podcast is to, you are choosing. Your 20s is an opportunity, psychologically speaking, where you are more flexible than you will ever be in the rest of your life, to cut out old habits, build new habits, and set yourself up for a trajectory for the rest of your life, right? And I think it's very vital. The only way you're going to truly succeed at this is if you first accept, I am responsible for my life. I have one option, which is to either do something about things or just let life hit me in the face every day. Which one are you going to choose? Are you going to let life smack you in the face every day and just be like, oh, this is terrible? Or are you going to start learning how to dodge those punches and how to fight back? Like, you have to choose. And I think that, again, that's a good place to end it. Any closing thoughts you would offer for people as far as, getting into this idea that life is theirs to lead?
Absolutely. It's basically the same thing that I just said there, but like, you can either choose to be a victim, to point your blame at everyone else, and to live in that miserable state of life, or you could choose the opportunity mindset. You could choose to see the world as what it is, and as a beautiful place where you have the opportunity to be whatever you want to do, to be whoever you want to be, do whatever you want to do, and get after it. And that happens when you make that acceptance of responsibility. That happens when you look at the world and you look at yourself and you realize that I'm ultimately responsible for what happens. So I'm going to get up and I'm going to get after it. And that's what I close on, is that, you either want a happy life or a miserable one. Like, which is it? Because those are your two options at this point in time. And I'm going to choose the happy one every time. And I'm much happier for it, obviously.
For sure. I think we both are. So, all right. Well, we'll leave you guys there this time. We'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode.